I suppose maybe the title might be a bit misleading or whatever, the Prohibition of Sulky-Racing 2018. As you know, I introduced this bill back in 2018, a similar piece of legislation, in an effort to bring together different communities. You know, the horse is a wonderful animal, and I'm glad to see Deputy Jane O'Kenny here, because I know he's an interest in these projects as well. And I want to say at the outset, as a Buccalogue and a young boy and a young man, I've worked with a horse on the farm and through the water, and we covered the spuds and whatever. So I do like horses, and we in Tipperary have a wonderful record of the horse racing industry, and indeed, you know, of all different types, in the flats and show jumping, and indeed with great prowess and great engagement. I also want to say that I have been engaged with, I was involved in the Traveller Bell-top wagon, a wonderful project that I was involved in when I was in the VEC and Carhealach of the Adult Education Board. Fabulous project. So I'm interested in working with all peoples and none, and try and have a safe situation for sulky racing and sulky trotting to take place. And indeed, I know in my own area, quite a parish next door to me, Ballybacon, I know a good few gentlemen there who have their pony and little sulky and do pleasure runs. But it's the racing on public roads, and where no licence is granted is what I'm trying to avoid, and try and work with people to see. And I thank the people that contacted me today, many of them from all over the country, who have sulkies, and sent me the most splendid photographs and evidence of their sulky, of their ponies, and their trailers, or the cats, or whatever they want to call them, and have engaged. And are anxious to meet me even tomorrow, to see if we could work together. I believe in Natli Curl Kayla, and you know, it's no point having division, have engagement. And I have approached Horse Racing Ireland, and I have approached, you know, the different tracks, some of them, to see if there could be a shared usage of facilities and have this sport carried on safely and well authorised policely, and maybe charities could benefit from it. I also want to salute Jonathan Irwin of the Jack and Jill fame. You might most know him, but he was very involved, and I was involved with him, and held a seminar in, Deputy Kenny was at as well, a seminar in the AV room some years ago about the prisoner horse project in the prison in the West, Castlereagh. And I spoke to Jonathan today, and thankfully the 10 stables are finished under one roof, but because of COVID hasn't been engaged in yet. So I look forward to that project being rolled out, and helping people to, you know, continue their love of their animals and their friendship. And as you know, the animals can be very therapeutic for people, and we see that with dogs and everything, as regards, you know, people with autism or whatever. And so we know things now we didn't know before. So look, that's just as a forward. The bill has one simple aim, and this is to prohibit sulky road racing where, and I emphasise where, no lawful permission has been granted. The primary motivation behind the bill is to address the growing health and safety and welfare concerns for the public, but also for the horses and young passengers concerned a lot of times. The bill does not impact upon off-road sulky racing in any shape, make or form. Sulky road racing, in which children as young as 10 hitch horses or ponies to lightweight cats and race them down busy motorways, or indeed national primary roads, or indeed primary or tertiary roads, is an extremely dangerous activity. The activity is also brutal, cruel to the health and welfare of the animals concerned. And I know that from people contacting me, but I know it from the vets who have been called to the scene, and it's their evidence I'm going on, not mine. I'm not expert in a horse, you know, the body parts and especially the legs, and I wouldn't be qualified to deal with that. As I said, the horses are often raised, as I said, for far too young an age to be ridden, and that is a problem. And the gentleman I spoke to today said yes, they acknowledge that there's rogue elements in it, and it's not right. And the young age and a higher risk of torn ligaments, broken bones, or other serious injuries. They rarely have proper shoes or tack, and their riders usually have no permits or indeed insurance, meaning that any horses wounded during the races are likely to be killed on sight. And you know what, there is legislation where the horses have to have it be microchipped and have to be, you know, have a license and permit and everything else. But look, that's another issue. For that matter, there are usually moving vehicles on the same road at the same time as the sulky races, putting motorists, pedestrians and sulky riders and the animals themselves in grave danger. And that's the worry. In fact, yet again, recent footage, a copy of which I attached today, of a race involving two trotting ponies drawing sulkies, has shocked a lot of the Irish public. The tragic case which led to the death in February 16 in Clondalkin of a young boy, just 12, when he was thrown under a truck after being involved in a sulky accident, has been a motivating factor for me in bringing this bill before the House. In fact, that young boy Sean's own family have said that they hope stronger regulations can prevent future loss, and that's very magnanimous of them. Thus, the bill essentially seeks to address some of the deficiencies in the existing law. Currently, it is almost exclusively a matter for local authority bylaws to address this issue. This is creating to a complete lack of consistent approach. And for example, counties, my own county, Tipperdown, Kilkenny, Limerick and Waterford all have different bylaws. And I had an interesting engagement today with the Minister of State from Kilkenny, the Green man today. When he was in the council, his name just eludes me, when he was in the council in Kilkenny, they made huge efforts to get this off-road onto tracks, and nearly got it over the line, but unfortunately it fell at the final furlong of the last fence, which is a pity. And indeed, I thank him for his sharing his experience with me. So, local authority bylaws have proven completely insufficient to sufficiently address the issue with this bill, aiming to implement a more holistic, national and cohesive approach to regulations for the area. That's what I want. I'm not a killjoy. I'm not anti-sport or anti-horse, but health and safety is a primary reason. The main elements of the bill include Section 1 of the bill set out to the remit of or meaning of the sulky racing under the bill to be the racing of horses drawn vehicles on any road under local authority jurisdiction. Section 2 of the bill provides that a person shall not organise or cause or permit to take place any performance involving A. Sulky racing, B. Riding or attempting to ride an animal which, by the use of any appliance or any appliance horse, a horse-drawn carriage is or has been stimulated with the intention of making it a race, or indeed C. Any other activity that may cause unnecessary suffering to an animal and is prohibited by animal health and welfare regulations, and that's very important. And I'd like to thank former Ear Hanador, Rena O'Donnell in my office, our office, for helping with this, and indeed David Mullins for helping me draft this bill as well. Section 3 of the bill sets out that responsibilities for local authorities. The bill grants local authorities all the powers necessary to enforce the law. Section CAR of the bill provides that offences or penalties under for non-compliance, those found in breach of the law, could a potential maximum fine up to and including €5,000 or a term of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months. Section 5 of the bill outlines the administrative steps to be followed around proceedings and sanctions, including the provision of fixed penalties. Therefore, it is hoped that you will, my colleagues will be minded to supporting this legislation, which ultimately aims to find a national formula to address this serious ongoing issue before any other fatalities or indeed tragedy occurs. And I look forward to constructive debates. And that's my motivation. And indeed, I sincerely hope that people will, and I'm not saying this bill is perfect or anything like it, it's an effort to be put in, and I don't know what the government are doing on it, but whether they're opposing it, are going to accept it, and it's open completely to be amended and changed and recreated as a proper, meaningful piece of legislation that will deal with this very concerning issue. Because there's not a day goes by, literally, in the summertime especially, that I don't, and winter time, I get calls, and my office get calls from all over the country, but certainly from Munster, that there are incidents of women going home from work or going to work and being forced off the road. And indeed, the people I spoke to this evening from Galway about the racing, they are adamant that we work together and to have these races permitted on a legal position occasionally, and once or twice a month or whatever, and have no attending cars or vans driving video them. That's the inherent danger altogether. When there's a whole wave coming at you of maybe 3 or 4 sulkies across the road and several cars and vans right behind them and pushing them on, and nobody on the road has anywhere to go. A pregnant woman come from work in Limerick some time ago, was forced off the road upside down, a pregnant woman in a field. And that's not right. I have countless experiences of where cars have been damaged and the sulkies in many cases haven't even stopped and kept going, and that's not fair to hard-pressed taxpayers who are paid their tax and insurance and want to be on the road. And as I said, I've seen recently it taking place in the fog, dangerous fog. I've seen it taking place in frosty weather where it couldn't be safe with slippery road. And, we must just try and work together to try and find a permanent solution. And indeed, as I said, I mentioned the horse project I was involved in myself, the Belltop Wagon project, and I also mentioned the horse project that's taking place in the prison. And I salute the prison services, and I hope this Minister for Justice now continues to support it, because that is very badly needed, and as I said, it's very therapeutic. But from the point of view of cruelty, and that it has to be stamped out. With the animal rescues then, who do tremendous work in Tipperary and all over the country, the Dail, the Anne Williamson, and indeed in Crappanagrawn and Mullinahone, and the others, and the department officials who are called out. And indeed, we have incidents every year quite close to me at home where the large number of horses are kept on land at Knockcrofty, and there have been horrific experiences there, and that's not to do with Sulky-Racing. They're wintered there, and it's just not right. It's sad, and people are very hurt, and they're very challenged by it. And indeed, I want to pay tribute to now deceased Garda Sergeant Niall O'Halloran, who was our local community Garda. He had made gallant efforts to try and deal with this situation and try and deal with it, because many people's properties are being trespassed as well by those horses. When they're hungry, you can't blame their horses. They haven't enough of fodder or feed, so the regulations need to be tightened up across the sector here, Department of Agriculture, on Garda Síochána and local authority. And in the UK, I understand that they have a dedicated police outfit to deal with it, because it's so dangerous, and it's and it could be enjoyed by many and all if it was off-road and or occasionally on-road with permits. And indeed in France, it's a very lucrative industry, and lots of money is made for the coffers of the French finance minister from the proceeds and the betting taxes and everything else. So it can be done. We must look at best practice throughout Europe. We must look at best practice, internationally. And indeed, the harness, I think that Deputy Kinnear know, the harness people, they have a different setup, and they're on tracks, and they're organised, and I don't get any complaints about it, or other deputies don't. I'm not saying I'm getting all the complaints, but I'm getting a lot of them. So we can look at best international practice. We can try and have better regulations, but I'm for the carrot and stick. Try to bring the people with us and try and ensure that both, in the first instance, the riders, whether they be young, and some of them are quite young, and also the horses, and above all, the general public who are cycling, pedestrians, with buggies, pushing buggies, or indeed running on the road or driving. We're all entitled to share the same space, and we must share the same space at the best of our ability. But safety has to be paramount. And indeed, injuries like this are just quite horrific when we've seen them. And the potential for more injuries and worse is still out there. So, as I said, it's a humble effort on my part to try and address this serious issue. And indeed, I look forward to hearing the views of the other, and the views of the Minister first, and indeed the other talk to Dail that are interested in this as well, because, as I said, we need to deal with this issue once and for all, and an effort to start enacting legislation to make it safer for everyone, and roads health and safety. Because people say to me, and they're appalled, and rightly so, and not appalled, but you have to have a child in a car restrained, and rightly so. 20, 30 years ago it was different, but there's the laws now. And then they see young children literally hanging off these, and they worry and they're fearful for someone to fall off them or whatever. And again, this time of year, winter, the days are so short, there's no, normally never any, fluorescent jackets or fluorescent lights at the back of them or whatever. So we must try and work it out and try and proceed together on this. And I'm willing to meet those representatives in the coming days and weeks and in the new year and try and work with them to have it a better situation, regulated or more regulated certainly, and have less chances for major incidents or accidents or even death.
Thank you, Deputy. The response to the government's response to the bill.
Thank you, Cahirla, and thanks to Deputy McGrath for his private member's motion here this evening as well. The use of sulkies, Deputy McGrath, or any other horse-drawn vehicle, including on public roads, is a legitimate activity, as you know, provided and only provided it is done in a safe manner and having due care and consideration to other road users and the animal's well-being, and in particular has to be in compliance with any relevant legislation, including local government, road safety, public order and animal welfare legislation, as well as any public bylaws, which you referred to yourself in your opening contribution. The use of sulkies on public roads specifically, as with the use of all vehicles, including all animal-drawn vehicles, is governed by the relevant provisions of the Roads and Road Traffic Acts. Let me be very clear in that the practice of holding unauthorised races of any kind, including sulky races on public roads which are open to traffic, is dangerous, and the Roads Traffic Act of 1993 requires anyone intending to hold, organise or promote a road race to give at least 1 month's notice in writing to the Road Authority and to the Garda Síochána. The Road Authority may then prohibit it or impose restrictions on such races. Anyone who contravenes the requirement to give notice to adhere to this prohibition or conditions is guilty of an offence. Enforcement of these provisions, as with law enforcement generally, of course, is a matter for the Garda Síochána to follow through on and monitor. In opposing this bill, therefore, Deputy McGrath, I would like to again remind deputies that racing of any kind, including sulkies or any other horse-drawn vehicles on the roads, can be a legitimate activity provided it is done in a safe manner, giving due care and consideration to road users, and that the animal's well-being is catered for, and of course also, as I've just outlined, that is in accordance with the laws as they currently stand, and which are very clear and precise in relation to the legalities and the requirements for anyone considering a race. In considering the animal welfare perspective, I would draw the Deputy's attention to the Animal Health and Welfare Act of 2013, which provides robust and wide-ranging protection for all animals. This includes horses and ponies used in racing of any sort, including on roads. Horse owners or keepers who allow harm to come to the animals in their care will have committed an offence under this Act. Anyone employ animals for any purpose, including sulky drivers, must also comply with the Act, which prohibits a person from carrying out any activity in a manner that causes unnecessary pain or suffering or endangerment to the health or welfare of an animal in their control. The issue of regulating the activity has been examined by my department, and the issues are complex and are not always clear-cut either, particularly as a variety of horse-drawn vehicles are legitimately and safely used on Irish roads. My department's engagement with sulky racing is fully focused on animal welfare and education, raising awareness of the importance of good horse care and welfare among sulky participants and the owners and keepers of trotting horses. My department has demonstrated this commitment by funding an education programme designed specifically for sulky drivers and trotter horse owners in a number of locations around the country in 2018 and last year as well. In addition to education on husbandry, handling and welfare generally, these courses encourage participants to move away from the road racing practices and move to racing on tracks, and to engage with the regulated sport of harness racing on tracks as operated by the Irish Harness Racing Association. While I am fully aware, Deputy, of the potential dangers of holding unauthorised races of any kind, including sulky races on public roads which are open to traffic, I would remind you that a mechanism to permit, prohibit or impose conditions on such races under Section 74 of the 1993 Roads Act, and the issues regarding the use of public roads are very much covered in that Act already. In addition to the Road Traffic Acts, local authorities also have powers under the Control of Horses Act 1996 to introduce bylaws regulating activities involving horses in their respective functional areas. And finally, Deputy, the programme for government undertakes to continue prioritising equine welfare and to developing additional urban horse welfare programmes where education on all aspects of equine husbandry are considered. The government has committed to the continued robust enforcement of the Animal Health and Welfare Act 2013 and to review the sentencing regime underpinning this legislation, and any welfare concerns identified in your bill, Deputy McGrath, as proposed, certainly can be considered as part of this review. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The next is Sinn Féin's. I understand that Deputies Mark Carthy and Miles Quinlivan are sharing 10 minutes. Is that correct? Deputy Mark Carthy.
Thank you, Cahirlock, and I want to thank and commend Deputy McGrath for bringing this important issue to the House by way of legislation, and it was and is Sinn Féin's intention that we would support the passage of this bill through this stage in order to ensure that we have an opportunity to debate and thrash out all of the different issues that has been outlined. I'm disappointed to hear that the Minister has taken a different approach. This is a real issue. A deputy wouldn't go to the effort of drafting a bill and bringing it before this House if it wasn't for the fact that this has been raised in offices by a number of concerned sets of individuals within our communities. The concerns are multifaceted. We have the concerns particularly around road safety, and we also have the concerns around equine welfare. Neither of them are being adequately addressed as we speak. The Minister referred to the powers of the Gardaí. The difficulty is that there is distinctions and difficulties with road traffic law because it isn't an offence to have a horse-drawn or pony-drawn carriage, but it is an offence to race them. And therefore, there is a difficulty oftentimes in determining whether or not something actually constitutes a race. Of course, horse-drawn carriages are not allowed on motorways at all, and we've seen some very, very dangerous instances over the past number of years. I'm sure Deputy McGrath and others will know this, and I'm sure the Minister will be aware that there are huge problems with equine welfare right across the state. It's not necessarily a problem with the legislation per se. The Minister has outlined the Animal Health and Welfare Act. He's outlined the role of local authorities and others. The problem is that when issues pertaining to equine welfare are raised with the Department of Agriculture, they're pointed to the direction of a local authority. When they go to the local authority, they're pointed in the direction of the Gardaí, and when they go to the Gardaí, they're directed back to the Department of Agriculture. There isn't a clear, defined line of responsibility where people take charge of this issue. There is almost no, in most parts of the country, no dedicated staff and resources allocated to the monitoring of issues pertaining to equine welfare. So I would have thought that this bill presented an ideal opportunity to start dealing with these issues, and I was looking forward as a member of the Agriculture Committee of the Oireachtas to actually teasing out the provisions of the bill as they stand to see where we can improve them and where we can make them better and where we can make them robust, in conjunction, of course, with the Minister and the Department. To me, that would be absolutely the best way and the best approach to deal with these issues. And certainly, there's a number of areas we have to deal with the issue of equine welfare. It's absolutely pivotal. There are too many aspects of existing legislation that are being ignored, and there are too many gaps within the existing legislation. And we need to get this right, because horses in particular have a special place in the Irish psyche. They're a beautiful animal, as has already been said, and they've played such a part in the development over so many years, not only of rural communities, but Ireland is unique almost of having an urban culture of horses, and that culture unfortunately have had very negative connotations in recent times, and I'm fairly of the belief that it doesn't need to have that negative connotation. And I believe that if we were to work with those communities in urban centres that have had a tradition of horse ownership, and with other communities, including the travelling community, that have traditions and cultures associated with the use of horses, to ensure that we actually get over what is a very negative perception and what are very real animal welfare concerns in terms of how some animals are being treated. I think that we could create a very vibrant and dynamic new culture of animal and horse ownership that actually respects the welfare of the horses at all particular times. So these are really important issues, and I think they warrant substantial debate and teasing out at committee stage, and it's for that reason that Sinn Féin will be supporting this bill.
Thank you, Deputy Quinlivan.
Firstly, I just want to say I'll be supporting this bill and thank Dail Rural Independence for bringing it forward. Minister, in the Dáil debate on the 13th of December 1977, the late Limerick TD Mick Lipper raised the issue of wandering horses in Limerick and asked what the then Minister for Justice, what action he would take if he proposed to take any action regarding the serious problem created by wandering horses in Limerick City. So 43 years later, here we are talking about the same problems. At least 1,120 stray or wandering horses have been collected in Limerick since 2015. Most end up, unfortunately, being euthanised. This is a waste of Garda resources, council resources, time and money. I know from previous PQ response I got from the Department of Agriculture has contributed almost €12 million to local authorities in respect to the control of horses activities for the period of 2011 to 2016. Of this, almost €2 million, 1.8 million, was paid to Limerick City Council. I believe that a statewide approach is needed with regards to regulating sulky-racing. Such regulations is needed to protect sulky riders, other road users, and ensure the welfare of animals. The keeping of ponies and horses has long been a tradition in many parts of my home city of Limerick. It is a tradition that has been passed through generations of families, and for the most part, the animals are well maintained and cared for. I know many of these people, and they're very decent, good citizens of Limerick. People like Ger Hogan and his horse probably saved the lives of people in the Limerick flood in 2014. Respecting these traditions, I believe it is time to consider an equine centre within Limerick City, one that can be accessed by all. However, that said, we cannot ignore that there are many who use and basically abuse these animals. They have a lack of compassion towards them and treat these beautiful creatures cruelly. And many never had any tradition whatsoever of keeping horses. In the last week or so, I had to contact the authorities in Limerick on 2 occasions so that carcasses of dead horses could be removed. One horse was malnourished and had abrasions throughout his body. It was an awful sight to see. Unfortunately, the images of this poor animal were circulated across social media. Another young pony lay dead in the city estate. Fortunately, some local residents covered the carcass with a blanket, so children of the area did not see the full extent of the poor creature's injuries. I personally had to intervene on Saturday to have these remains removed from a busy city estate. In another part of our city, horses were left in the city graveyard. I believe they were intentionally put there. They were uncared for and they were grazing within the confines of the graveyard. The horses damaged the site and deterred those who wished to visit their loved ones resting place from visiting. This flagrant disregard for the welfare of the animals and the wishes of the visitors at the graveyard was shameful. Wandering horses have been an issue in Limerick for many years. That the situation has been allowed to continue for decades is shameful. In some cases, when the authorities have attempted to seize abused animals, they've been met with threats of violence. This is not fair and proportional. This is what happens when the law is not applied year after year, and it is a result of the department not doing its job. It is now a major problem across a number of our towns and cities across the state, which interestingly is largely associated with working class areas of Limerick City, Cork and Dublin, as well as areas of rural Ireland such as Tipperary. If these horses were roaming around Montenotte in Cork, Foxrock in Dublin or North Circle Road in my own town of Limerick, I suspect there would be a different definition of fair and proportional response. We've seen the videos of unregulated sulky races. We don't need to be a member of the traffic court to understand the dangers these races place to both participants and other road users. These races place our Gardaí in an extremely difficult position and an extremely conflicted position as well. The Gardaí know they must stop the race to protect the other road users, as often these races take up both sides of the road. However, the Gardaí are faced with a tough decision when it comes to intervening. If they do take action, they risk the welfare of the animals and the riders and other road users. I appreciate the intentions of this motion, but I'm concerned about some aspects of it. First, I think some of the definitions contained in the motion are too broad and in some cases contradictory. Secondly, the Gardaí are empowered to deal with both illegal sulky racing and riding. I worry that introducing a new ministry into policing of sulky racing could cause operational problems. I would like to see more Garda enforcement in terms of illegal sulky riders from our streets. In Limerick, road users get frustrated and anxious when they have to decide whether to stay behind or overtake a sulky that is often controlled by somebody who is too young to drive a car. There's a tradition around sulky racing and we should recognise that, but what we must also respect is the safety of all road users. It is not acceptable to have underage children controlling an animal or vehicle on public road. Animal welfare remains a huge issue across urban and rural areas. So far this year in Limerick, 118 horses have been seized. Unfortunately, again, the vast majority euthanised, and there has been numerous documented cases of disgraceful abuse and cruelty to horses, both within Limerick and further afield. We need better enforcement of animal welfare laws. We need more support for animal welfare groups. In Limerick, one such group is Limerick Animal Welfare, and they do tremendous work. They deal with all types of animals, and when I speak with the wonderful folks who operate this organisation, I'm told of the sheer volume of calls they receive on a monthly basis. Regretfully, all too often, when it comes to horses and ponies, all they can do is contact somebody to ensure the animal is terminated in the most humane way possible. So this motion needs greater exploration. The intentions are very good, and I have concerns about some of its execution. I will support the motion being brought to committee stage so that particulars can be examined.
Thank you, Deputy. Next up is Deputy Matt Shanahan. And then you're next.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity just to speak on this for a few moments, and I hope that the Government will be generous in reciprocating what Deputy McGrath is bringing here. I think this is an issue that needs to be absolutely aired. So I think sulky racing is seen as a cultural activity for many, but I think it's important that we don't conflate the difference between trotting ponies and people who keep ponies for recreational use, drawing carts, and sulky racing. Specifically, sulky racing, I would say, revolves around horse trading. There's quite a bit of gambling involved, and there are certainly animal welfare rights. And like every activity, there are some people who do it to a very high standard, and unfortunately, there are many who do not. Sulky racing particularly is conducted, as the Minister knows, on public roads, and I have never heard of a sulky race in my area, and I've seen plenty of them where the guards have been notified or where the roads were closed. I think it's often cruel to animals. It's largely done potentially to ponies who may not be fully grown, and I would say that as someone who knows something about horses, I would not gallop ponies on shod on a road, because that is very hard to their feet and it will cause lameness in animals. But I've seen it done many times in sulky racing. It is also extremely dangerous to other road users because they do not know how, as someone has already highlighted, whether they should overtake. And often has been pointed out, you will see young children sitting unstrapped, unsupervised often on sulkies, and they are creating a danger to themselves and to some unfortunate who may be involved in an accident with them. I would point out too, it is also encouraging the keeping of animals where the owners do not have land holdings or stabling. And that is seen around the country, and it's particularly prevalent, as we know, on local authority lands. And I think that certainly we know of planning schemes that have been mooted in the past couple of years where stabling is being made available, particularly to members of the travelling community. And certainly I think that should be encouraged. But then lands have to be allocated to make sure that we have adequate lands to care properly for horses. And like any land holding, there should be a ratio of horses to land, the same as we have cattle to an acre. Stabling is very important, and I think the local authority needs to do something about ensuring that there's compliance in terms of registration on ponies and chipping in particular. And I would point out, and I've seen this in my own area, that oftentimes significant intimidation of private landowners occurs where ponies are put in, and if you threaten to take them out, you will be threatened as a result. That is totally unfair. And as I would say, that is in the minority of cases, not in the majority. But I believe that, for sulky racing to be successful, it needs to be registered to some degree, and it needs to be regulated. And I think there are many who are involved in the area would welcome some form of regulation, standards and compliance that would allow them to carry on this activity as a recreation safely. So I think we need a solution that respects the rights of all peoples involved here. And we need to allow sulky racers create competition, because that is how they basically signify their animals for those who wish to sell their animals on. That's how they create value for them. And I think in that respect, as Deputy McGrath has already outlined, there must be opportunity for the local authorities to make lands available. And certainly if we look at the success of pony racing in the US, and as he has highlighted in France, there is probably a very vibrant industry here to be developed, and I think everybody would be in a win-win in that situation. But I think firstly, we must have standards and they must be enforced. So I think we need to look at what is being done successfully in other countries, and we need to start with an area of mutual respect. And in mutual respect, everybody has to have, something of what they want. There has to be a compromise. There has to be a win-win. And certainly equine animal standards must be observed. But I think also people are right to have, their cultural icons preserved. We don't want to do anything to disrupt that, but we want to make sure that it is done fairly and that it is done in the right way. And I would say that the local authorities have a very large part to play. I would say the Garda have enough to be doing without running around trying to regulate sulky racing on the roads, and therefore we have to provide some amenity areas where this can be done easily and effectively. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you, Deputy. Next up is Deputy Gina Kenny.
Thanks, Chair. And I probably won't use all my 10 minutes. And it's good that we're having this debate about essentially what's animal welfare and equine welfare, which has there's no getting away from it. Equine welfare in Ireland has had a patchy history, to say the least. But I always come from the standpoint that the vast majority of horse owners are very responsible with their horses. There is an element of irresponsibility, and that was obviously borne out in sulky racing on roads, which is nobody can defend. It's completely reckless. It's completely dangerous, not only to the people that are on the sulky, the horses, and car owners. So it's completely irresponsible for those that do it. And for sometimes, actually most of the time, a vast amount of money can actually be involved in the practice as well. So coming from an urban environment where I grew up, there was lots of horses in area environment and so forth, and there was an issue with where you could actually stable your horse and so forth, and that has evolved over time. There's a long tradition of owning horses in an urban environment, and it's been a very, very positive experience in relation to the responsibility of owning a horse, and that's the Department of Agriculture recently, in the last 3 to 4 years, allocated a lot of money towards a project in Clondalkin Equine Club, which is one of its only kind in Ireland, where it's it's young people can actually stable their horse in an urban environment, and it's a controlled environment, an educational environment, and a responsible environment. And I think that's a very good way of actually bringing the practice of horse ownership in a rural background and an urban background. Just getting to the point of the bill, I just think by banning something, it will drive it more and more underground. And that's what it will do. If you ban sulky driving, racing, it will just have the opposite effect. Because what I can see is that there is regulation and laws there to prosecute anybody that does these things that are illegal. It's obviously plainly obvious that it is illegal that they're doing. Because harness racing is a very responsible sport in Ireland. There's a really, really good track in Portmarnock, and harness racing is done there very responsibly. It's very regulated, and it's a really good sport to be involved in and to observe. So that is, it's important not to conflate, some people that are completely irresponsible, and there are those that are very irresponsible, and they will do such things as we see online videos where they're racing horses recklessly on dual carriageways, and that is going to lead to an accident sooner or later. So it's going to be very difficult to support Deputy McGrath's bill, just in relation to, I understand, is kind of his sentiment is that for animal welfare. I understand that, but I think it will have the opposite effect in kind of driving sulky racing underground, where it will be even more dangerous than it is now. So I think regulation, education, and kind of I suppose, you know, engaging with sulky owners, and I think that's the way to do it. There's other parallels between what, you know, there's kind of scramblers that we have a kind of big problem with in urban environments. I think if you like laws alone, I think just won't solve this. I think, you know, there is laws there, but you need more regulation, you know, and control, and to say to people, look, at this is, you know, a very, very dangerous kind of pastime that you're doing on national roads, which could lead to people dying. So on that basis, it's going to be very, very difficult for P4Profit to support this bill. Thank you.
Next slot is a government slot of government wrap-up of 5 minutes. Minister Tate, Martin Hayden.
And I'd like to start off my contribution here by thanking Deputy McGrath for bringing forward this motion or piece of legislation before the House here today, and to acknowledge the concern that has been raised by Deputy McGrath, Deputy Carty, Deputy Quinlivan, Deputy Shanahan and Kenny in relation to their concerns, which were originally in relation to Sulky-Racing, but broader then as well into the area of horse welfare and beyond. And an issue as a Kildare man, who's most people in Kildare are passionate about racehorses, the same as Deputy McGrath, but Tipperary people. You know, it is a debate that needs to be had, and I'm very happy that my department has increased funding allocation into the area of horse welfare, and particularly I know something through HRI that they take very seriously. But I do think that, you know, in acknowledging that and in acknowledging concerns with some of the images that we've all seen in relation to sulky racing on national roads, we also need to identify, when we're bringing forward any piece of legislation or changing existing legislation or introducing new legislation, we need to identify exactly what is the problem it is that we're trying to solve, and make sure that what the remedy is that's been proposed will actually do that. And obviously, as legislators, we all have to be careful of the area of unintended consequences. You know, that certain associated activities could be impacted upon by the introduction and amending of legislation that wasn't necessarily planned for. And in that regard, I think it's important to reiterate that sulky racing in and of itself is a legitimate activity, provided it is carried out in an appropriate location. And I think to ban sulky racing is one thing, the sulky racing that takes place on national roads without authorisation is completely different. But sulky racing itself, as I say, is legitimate, carried out in the appropriate location, in a safe manner, having due care and consideration to other road users, obviously, with animal welfare and well-being being absolutely paramount. I obviously want us in compliance with all relevant legislation, including local government, road safety, public order, animal welfare legislation, as well as any local bylaws. In looking to introduce new legislation, we obviously need to ensure that existing legislation does not already exist to cover the same purpose and to address the same issues, because then we're into the area of saying, does this issue need legislation, or is it compliance, is it implementation of existing legislation? We also must ensure that in trying to address an area of concern, that we don't ban or outlaw other legitimate activity as a consequence, and possibly by mistake. I'd like to reassure the House that the animal welfare issues raised by the deputies here today are already covered under the Animal Health and Welfare Act of 2013, which is a really significant piece of legislation that I was a member of the Agriculture Committee at that time. I remember we spent a lot of time on it. Additionally, the issues regarding the use of public roads are already covered by the Roads Act of 1993. Holding unauthorised races on public roads which are open to traffic is very dangerous, and as was made clear earlier, anyone who holds such an event without required authorisation, as detailed by Minister McConalogue earlier, is committing an offence. More generally, the use of all vehicles is subject to relevant provisions of the Road Traffic Acts, and local authorities have the powers to introduce bylaws regulating activity involving horses in their areas. All races involving sulkies or other horse-drawn vehicles, for that matter, must be done safely in accordance with the law and having due care to animal welfare. The Animal Welfare Act 2013, as I said, provides robust and wide-ranging protection for all animals, including horses and ponies, used in any kind of racing. Everybody employing animals for any purpose must comply with this Act, including sulky drivers. It prohibits anybody from carrying out activity in a manner that causes unnecessary pain and suffering or endangerment to the health or welfare of animals in their control. The Animal Health and Welfare Act of 2013 ensures protection of animals used in sulky racing. This is the focus of the Department of Agriculture, because racing in itself is a sport which comes in under the Department of Sport. The use of roads obviously comes in the Department of Transport, but the area of animal welfare is the responsibility of my department, the Department of Agriculture, one we take very, very seriously. And my department works very hard to raise awareness of the importance of good horse care and welfare amongst sulky participants and the owners and keepers of trotting horses. So, in closing, Cathaoirleach, I would also like to point out that under the current programme for government, the government is committed to continuing robust enforcement of the Animal Health and Welfare Act 2013 and increasing investment in animal welfare and, in particular, horse welfare issues. I take on board the concerns that have been raised by Deputy McGrath and others outlining your contributions today, and I know that my department is happy to engage with you and the Agriculture Committee, as Deputy Carty had outlined, in relation to the area of the role of the Animal Health and Welfare Act of 2013, as well as I know the Department of Transport and the role that it has to play in relation to the Road Traffic Act of 1993. Again, I'd like to thank Deputy McGrath and the other deputies for their contributions, but I think, having outlined the fact that I believe current legislation exists to deal with this, as Deputy Kenny has pointed out, to deal with this issue. It's not always easy to catch this activity that happens on motorways and roads, and I understand your concern, Deputy McGrath, but I believe the legislation is there. It's about its enforcement, and then the issues of animal welfare I believe we're dealing with, but we're always open to discuss that more, debate that more, whether here or in committee. Thanks, Cathaoirleach.
Thank you, Minister. I now must call on Deputy Matthew McGrath for a response. 10 minutes. Deputy has 10 minutes.
Well, rather good. I thank all the deputies that contributed. A tradition, Minister, a tradition cannot act as a veto on legal responsibilities. And you've been quoting Minister McConlough, who went off and didn't even stay for the full debate. He probably wouldn't have been here at all, only for he had to make the correction of the record for something else. I mean, you're quoting the Animal Health Act in 2013, your 1993 Roads Act, and as Deputy Quinlivan said, 43 years ago, this issue of horses, stray horses, was brought up by former Deputy Micklin. 43 years ago. You can wheel out all the legislation you like, but clearly you're getting calls to your office. You see it yourself. All our deputies are, and I thank the people who came and are interested in sorting out this. It's not working, clearly. And I support the Department of Agriculture and thank them, officials and the council and the Gardaí in Tipperary and elsewhere, for the way they try to grab for this, but clearly it's a mismatch, and there's no coherent, decent legislation. In England, the United Kingdom, they have a dedicated, it's not the council and it's not the department, they have a dedicated police unit for dealing with this. And we had the stories there of what happened in cemeteries and graveyards. You know, that's just not acceptable. People have to respect that, and I have those problems myself in Tipperary, especially in Cashel. But look, I mean, I'm not a killjoy, or I'm not a fount of knowledge, so I'm shocked that the government can close their eyes to this. If raising this house first 43 years ago, if that was even the first time, 2 years ago I brought it forward again, and things have only got worse. And the animal cruelty. And you think you had money to throw away, the amount of money that you've given to the fund in the last 5 years, 12 million, I think. It's a shocking amount of money. And I know what it costs. I know the number of horses have been euthanized. It's shocking. And the cruelty involved. So, rather than deal with the problem and have proper, meaningful legislation with powers that can be clearly enforced, not a bit in the council and a bit in the department and a bit elsewhere and a bit in animal welfare, proper to deal with this issue up front. We have a very respectable and proud racing and a horse-owning tradition. And indeed, I didn't refer to it earlier, but it was wonderful to see, especially in the cities and towns, the horse-drawn carriages with the Guinness and horse-drawn carriages with all kinds of livery goods. And there was a huge respect and a relationship between the Irish people and the horses. And now it's gone to new and international highs with the race-horsing skills that we have in Tipperary with Coolmore and Aidan O'Brien and his family. And God, I know Tommy Stack. And look, I could name them for the day. We're very proud of them. And they give a lot of employment too. And the way they treat their horses. So I'm hoping, and my real effort was that the government wouldn't just reject this because it's Matthew McGrath's bill. I mean, all the deputies that spoke admit, if they're honest, and they have been honest, instead of the problem. And Deputy Kenny has issues with, in parts of it, and I accept that. And maybe the prohibition is the wrong word, but we must engage and try and have this brought in under, one piece of legislation where it can't be held without a licence. I'd love to ask the Minister, but he's not here now. How many, he said that you have to have a month's notice, give a month's notice, an application to the department and to get the Síochána to run a race. How many applications have you got in the department? How many? How many applications have you refused in the department for these licences with a month's notice? How many have been granted for this licence? I don't know what you're saying, but you can tell me privately or whatever afterwards. But that's what I'm going to ask you. I mean, you're all flowery language there, but it's meaningless. Pass the book. We have another department now, yeah. Pass the book around the house, around the kitchen and mind the dresser. Remember the famous man in Kelly House? What's his name? You're here longer than I am, you remember him. His name eludes me, but Kieran O'Hanlon, yes, it was indeed. Around the house and mind the dresser. Around the country and mind the Department of Agriculture and the Garda Síochána, the County Council, the health authorities. But you're not doing it. So why don't you bring forward a piece of legislation, robust legislation, with all your departments and all your resources and deal with it? Not come in here and just kind of rubbish this and say because it's a tradition. In actual fact, it's not a tradition. A horse with an affinity with horses, especially with the traveller community, is a long-standing commission. And I have fond memories of the sweep coming, Mr. O'Connor and his wife, with the mule actually drawing the bell-top wagon and a donkey at the back, and the engagement with the people and the families, and they used to make lovely coal turtles. And when I built the house in 1984, I bought a coal turtle off them, and it's still around. The craftsmanship that was in that is unbelievable. So, I mean, we can work with this together, and we can deal with it, and we can get it off track. And I'd ask you, Deputy Hayden, from the Plains of Kildare, as well as the Carhill, even though I would claim that we have more racing prowess in Tipperary than you have, but nonetheless that can be seen on the racetracks, to engage with Horse Racing Ireland, to engage with the different tracks that are there, and many underutilised race courses, to see if there could be days organised. Now, the people that phoned me today from Galway say that Sulky-Racing can't go on a track. I don't know the reason for that. I won't know till I meet him. But I think it's much safer and easier for any animal. The greyhounds are unable to run on sand surface because it's clearly couldn't be good to have them on without any shoes or anything running on the tar road. Ask any of us to run from here to Kildare, you'd have fairly sore limbs and fairly sore ankles and all as well. So animals then racing at speed. So listen, animal cruelty is involved here as well. And I salute the animal refuge. And it's not fair that they have to pick up the tabs. And I know every year before Christmas, probably next week it'll be announced. You'll probably have them already ready to send out the letters of throwing stops to funding to animal rescues. And it's very much needed. But they are operating on a shoestring. And they do tremendous work. And we need to support them. Like, there's huge cruelty issues, and there's huge anomalies here, Minister. No point passed it 43 years ago, Deputy Lipper raised it. I raised it 2 years ago. I'm raising it again. Will we do something about it, please? I am surprised that no Fianna Fáil or no Fine Gael backbenchers, or indeed Labour, or indeed Social Democrats are interested in this. I mean, they were here last week, the Social Democrats, a few weeks ago, trying to ban and destroy our very vital greyhound industry. And we have all these issues. This is going under our noses, and we want to turn a blind eye to it and turn backwards and blindfold ourselves when serious incidents are taking place, and it's a serious threat to human safety. Serious threat to human safety. And as I said, I'm no killjoy, so I want to work with them, and I'd love to have an all-party group, a committee here that would work with them. I know we have an all-party Oireachtas committee dealing with traveller issues now, but this is an issue that should be dealt with. And it could be very enjoyable, very resourceful, and a lot of badly needed revenue for the Department of Finance, Mr. Deputy O'Donoghue, as it is in other countries. So we're so insular here, we won't look abroad to see best practice, and we won't see, but this is going on in every, a lot of constituencies, and TDs are getting called for it, but for whatever reason, they don't want to talk about it. But I mean, it's just talk about sweeping under the carpet. It must be dealt with. And I'm quite appalled that Mr. McConnell and yourself come in to see him and just rubbish this. Instead of saying, look, I'm not saying it's perfect. Take the bill, embrace it, put it in for scrutiny and indeed discuss it at the different committees, agriculture, transport, you name it, and others, maybe health as well, and try and come together with a formula that we work together to try and enhance this situation and try and improve it. And as I said, I got about 60 WhatsApp messages this evening an hour from sulky owners and racers all over the country. And they are interested, and they're worried, because I was trying to do something that's not. I'm not. I'm interested in working with them. And I did get threatened the last time for what it's worth, and I hope it won't happen this time, that I'll be shot in Dublin for bringing up this issue. We can't have this kind of threats in a modern democracy. We can't be all afraid to deal with it, because the vast majority of people involved, as I said, I know many of them involved, are 100%, but there's a rogue element, and the people that spoke to me today accept that. That must be weeded out. So look, it's time that we grasp the nettle, and you're grasping so many other things that are nice and dandy, and you like to assume, and they're nice and policies that you think will go down well with the meeting. You do research and polls to know what the people want. The people want their children to be safe in their cars when they're bringing them to school or to college. The people want to know, a husband or wife, that the wife's going up and work, a pregnant woman, is not forced off the road upside down into a field when a whole road is taken over. And you expect Gardaí then with 2 on duty in a station like Dail to go out and stop a race in the old N8, which is used regularly, with 100, maybe 30 or 40 sulkies and maybe a couple of hundred people and vans and cars. Mayhem. Mayhem. Sure, look, no point in ignoring it. You know what the problem is there. We try and deal with it. And I know that the horse project that Jonathan and everyone was involved in the prison is very important. And they're all there, but they're all individual efforts. So, the Natalie Curlig here, and make an effort together here in this Parliament. It's our duty to protect the public. It's our duty to protect animal welfare. And it's our duty to protect the Gardaí as well, give them plenty of support and give them the powers, and the department officials and the county council officials and the horse wardens and whoever else. And we need a horse warden in Tipperary badly. And, you know, but it's not there. We're scratching at the surface. We're thinking around with it, pardon the pun, and we're fooling ourselves to think that it's not necessary. As I said, new Minister McConnell will come in. It mightn't be happening in Donegal, I don't know, but he should know more about this than come in and just read out this kind of a spiel and say he's flatly refusing to discuss this. So I'm hoping that this will be go at it again, and we'll work together with the people involved. And Deputy Kenny has been involved with his groups out, and I'd love to go and see that track, somebody the Hammonds track, which Joe said I would before. I'd like to see, because I like to learn as well. It's a bad day if we don't learn something. Good.
Know that this race has now concluded, and I must put the question. Is the question agreed? Is the question being opposed? Yes, okay. Then I must put the question. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. The Hockley atá or heave and cash oblidish tá in the Guinea. I believe that the motion is lost. Vote all. The vote will be postponed until the weekly division time next week, whatever time that is.